Hobbies ClubHouse Part 2. The Aftermath. 6 months had passed since Maze vanished, and the world had moved on. The DED Railroad continued its operations, and the missing passengers were chalked up as yet another unsolved mystery in the universe's endless expanse. But Riven couldn't move on. He'd lost weight, his once well-groomed appearance replaced by hollow cheeks, tangled hair, and sunken eyes. His apartment was a cluttered mess of case files, screenshots of Hobbies ClubHouse, and cryptic notes scrawled on sticky pads that covered every surface. The air smelled of stale coffee and despair. Riven's obsession consumed him. He spent every waking moment hunting for answers, combing through every episode of Hobbies ClubHouse. At first, it had been unbearable to watch. The once lively Maze was there, transformed into a caricature of herself. Her face was painted in garish colors, her movements unnatural and jerky, as though controlled by invisible strings. Yet her eyes betrayed her, the desperate, haunted gaze of someone who was still aware, still trapped. Maze, Riven whispered to himself, pausing the screen to study her altered form. Her voice had been distorted, twisted into something that no longer sounded human, but Riven could still recognize the cadence, the subtle inflections that made her her. He had watched every episode 100 times, trying to decipher some kind of pattern, a clue, anything that might lead him to her. But the show was a labyrinth of chaos, with sets that defied physics and characters that seemed to morph and shift between scenes. It was like staring into madness, and Riven felt it gnawing at the edges of his sanity. One cold, sleepless night, Riven found himself back on the DED Railroad. He had ridden the train countless times since Maze's disappearance, questioning passengers and staff, hoping for a lead. But the trail was always cold. The train hummed softly as it hurtled through the void, the faint chatter of passengers blending with the mechanical sounds of the engine. Riven sat alone, staring out the window at the swirling stars. A shadow fell over him. "Mind if I sit?" Riven looked up to see an alien, a wiry figure with translucent skin that shimmered like oil on water. It carried a faint, unsettling aura, as though it didn't entirely belong in this dimension. "Suit yourself," Riven muttered, shifting slightly to make room. The alien sat down, its glowing eyes fixed on him. "You're the one looking for the missing detective, aren't you?" Riven's heart skipped a beat. "What do you know about Maze?" The alien leaned closer, its voice dropping to a whisper. "I've seen her, in the clubhouse." Riven's breath caught. "You've been there?" The alien nodded. "Once. I escaped before they could trap me. But not without a cost." It held up one of its arms, and Riven noticed that it ended in a jagged stump, as though it had been severed and crudely healed. "They take more than your body, they take your will, your essence. But you already know that, don't you?" Riven clenched his fists. "How do I get in? How do I stop them?" The alien's eyes flickered. "The clubhouse isn't a place you can simply enter. It exists in the spaces between, feeding on fear and imagination. But there's a way, a ritual. Dangerous, but it might work." "I'll do anything," Riven said, his voice firm. The alien hesitated, then pulled a small, intricately carved stone from its cloak. "Take this. You'll need it to open the door. But be warned, once you enter, there's no guarantee you'll come back. And if you fail, they'll take you too." Riven took the stone, its surface cold and pulsing faintly under his fingers. "I'll get her back. I'll get them all back." The alien rose, its form shimmering as though it were about to dissolve. "Then you'd better hurry. They're growing stronger every day." Back in his apartment, Riven set the stone on his desk and studied it under the harsh light of a desk lamp. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its surface, shifting like liquid under his gaze. The alien had given him instructions, steps to perform the ritual, but the details were hazy, almost incomprehensible. With trembling hands, Riven lit a circle of candles around the stone, arranging the room according to the alien's cryptic directions. The air grew thick, the temperature dropping as he whispered the incantation. The stone began to glow, its light pulsating in time with his heartbeat. The room quaked, and a low hum filled the air, growing louder until it was deafening. Then, silence. When Riven opened his eyes, he was no longer in his apartment. He stood in a dark, twisted version of the DED railroad station. The walls were warped and pulsing, and the air smelled of decay. In the distance, the neon glow of the Hobbies ClubHouse loomed, its cheerful facade now an unsettling mockery. Riven swallowed hard and began to move toward it, his every step echoing in the oppressive silence. The clubhouse was worse than he had imagined. Inside, the air was heavy with the stench of rot and despair. The sets were nightmarish, their vibrant colors distorted into sickly hues. Puppets dangled from the ceiling, their lifeless eyes following him as he moved. Riven. The voice was faint, barely audible over the distorted theme song that played endlessly in the background. He turned to see Maze standing in the shadows, her painted face twisted into an expression of agony. "Maze," he called, running toward her. But as he got closer, her form began to flicker, her features shifting between her altered state and her former self. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, tears streaming down her painted cheeks. "You'll only make it worse." "I'm here to get you out," Riven said firmly, gripping her shoulders. Maze shook her head. "You don't understand. This place, it's alive. It feeds on us. The more you fight, the stronger it gets." A guttural laugh echoed through the room, and Riven turned to see the figure he had heard Maze describe in her notes, the androgynous humanoid with hollow black eyes and a predator's smile. "Ah, the loyal partner," it said, its voice dripping with mockery. "So noble. So predictable." Riven stepped in front of Maze, his fists clenched. "Let her go. Let them all go." The figure tilted its head, amused. "Why would I do that? They're perfect. Beautiful, raw emotion. They've made the show a masterpiece." Riven lunged at the figure, but it moved impossibly fast, vanishing and reappearing behind him. "You can't fight me, little human," it said, its voice a low growl. "But by all means, try." Riven and Maze ran, weaving through the twisted corridors of the clubhouse. The walls seemed to close in around them, the sets shifting and warping to block their path. "Is there a way out?" Riven asked, his voice strained. "There's a portal," Maze said. "But it's heavily guarded. And even if we make it, the others. We'll save as many as we can," Riven said firmly. They reached a large room filled with captive aliens, their bodies strapped to grotesque machines that drained their energy. Maze moved to free them, but the figure reappeared, its eyes burning with fury. "You won't ruin my masterpiece," it roared, the room shaking with its rage. Riven gripped the stone, its symbols glowing brighter as he held it aloft. The figure recoiled, hissing. "Maze, get them to the portal," Riven shouted. Maze hesitated, but Riven's determined gaze left no room for argument. She nodded and began freeing the captives, guiding them toward the portal's faint glow in the distance. Riven turned to face the figure, the stone pulsing in his hand. "Let's end this." The figure lunged, its form shifting into a monstrous, shadowy mass. Riven braced himself, the stone glowing brighter until it was blinding. With a guttural scream, the figure dissolved into darkness, and the clubhouse began to collapse. Riven stumbled toward the portal, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. Maze was there, helping the last of the captives through. "Hurry," she shouted, reaching out for him. He grabbed her hand, and together they leapt through the portal just as the clubhouse imploded, its twisted energy collapsing in on itself. They landed on the floor of the DED railroad station, the captives lying unconscious around them. Maze was back to her old self, her painted features gone. "It's over," Riven said, his voice barely a whisper. Maze looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and relief. "We did it." But deep down, Riven couldn't shake the feeling that the clubhouse wasn't truly gone. Something that powerful never really disappears, he thought, leaning back in his office chair. As the view panned out from Riven, something strange began to form. Words in an unreadable language started scrolling upward, resembling credits at the end of a show. Moments later, a tall figure with slick, curly skin, a colorful knitted vest, and a pristine white top hat appeared in front of the scrolling text. Cheerfully, the figure spoke, "Thanks for watching our new show, Ranger Detectives. Join us again in Hobbies ClubHouse." It waved with a smile, too wide for its features, stretching unnaturally across its face. Slowly disappearing as the view fades to black and finally shutting off, revealing an old box TV.